Glad to do it. Hi. Good afternoon. All right. Let's. I share with everybody a PowerPoint, a new one, a Google slide that we're going to finish up today and tomorrow on. But before we do that, I want you all to take a look at the board here. I have a short video on Alexander Hamilton, who was the finance treasurer, secretary of the Treasury for President Washington. We're going to talk, when everybody gets here, a little bit about Alexander Hamilton. We're still waiting on, Katie's not going to be here. She's got a meeting. Let me get attendance. Get that done now while we wait. No yawning. It's making me tired. All right, so you guys are period 9. Yep. Okay, let's get attendance while you guys are popping in. All right. So, Katie's out. Palin just went to Mrs. Huber's room. Who else we missed?
She went to go fill her water.
We should have 9, so we got 3, 4, 5, 6. Palin's 7. Katie's 8. Who's 9? Anna's 9. Okay, good. All right. All right. So we are going to hop off today. Today's start-off point is going to be on the character of Alexander Hamilton, who is going to be tasked with, he's got a number of tasks, but Hamilton's primary task as Treasury Secretary after the Constitutional Convention and after the election of Washington, he had a grand plan for the United States. And Hamilton's plan involved the United States as a business, a manufacturing, a trade, and an industry economy. Not focused on agriculture. Agriculture will be a component of it, but Hamilton's focus and Hamilton's vision for America under Washington's presidency is to make America into an industrial power. In the process, paying off America's war debt. America had a ton of debt. Today, the national debt is over $30 trillion. Trillion with a T.
That's crazy.
Okay? Yeah, it is extremely crazy. Washington inherited, and the nation inherited a debt in the millions after the war, and Hamilton's job, he sees his job as creating this military power, which will help the country become a wealthy nation, will help the country pay its debt, and his plan involves having the United States, the nation, assume each of the 13 states' debts that are left over from the war. Now, there's an issue on that. Some of the states have already paid off their war debt. Virginia, for example, had paid off its war debt. The state of Virginia had paid off its war debt. Hamilton comes in as Treasury Secretary, and his plan is to basically assume all of the debt of the states that owed money after the war ends and sell bonds to help pay for the cost of the war. And some states that paid off their debt are resentful of that because they feel that they have paid their debt. Why should the other states have their debts assumed? When we talk about debts being assumed, if debts are assumed, somebody is picking up the cost of your debt. Okay? Now, I'm going to kind of relate this to a situation that exists today, okay, to help you better understand it. President Biden, probably one of his most controversial decisions as president was last year signing an executive order which, for millions of students, basically it forgave a portion or all of their student debt. Students who have gone into debt to obtain a college degree, President Biden and the Democratic Party supported, and Biden signed an executive order. He couldn't get this to pass legislatively because it has no basis in law, but President Biden, as the president, issued an executive order saying that a portion of a lot of students' debt is going to be forgiven. Forgiven. Meaning what? If you owe $50,000 in college debt, Palin, and you can't, let's say, find a job in your field to help pay off that debt, President Biden, with his executive order, has told you what with that executive order? That you don't have to pay either all or a portion of that money back. That's called debt forgiveness. Now, is the debt really going away? Is the bank getting paid? The bank that loaned her the money, is the bank going to get their money back? Actually, yes, they are. The bank is not forgiving her debt. The United States is forgiving her debt, and they're forgiving it with paying it, and with whose dollars? Tax dollars are paying for these student debts to be forgiven. And what has happened, the Supreme Court has ruled that that's not constitutional. Debt forgiveness has to be passed legislatively. The president cannot just unilaterally say, I'm going to tell students that their debt's going to be forgiven. But the larger issue is a large number of Americans, when Biden made that executive order, a large amount of Americans screamed at the unfairness of it because they were students or they were families who had sent their children to college or had gone to college themselves and paid their debts already. And their question to President Biden when he passed this executive order was, what happens to Americans who have already paid their college debt back? Are they entitled to get some of this money that the federal government is using to forgive student loans for students who aren't going to pay their debt back? And what do you think the Biden administration told those Americans? If you paid your loan back and you paid it on time and you did everything right to repay your loan, and are you going to benefit from student loan forgiveness? No. He's screwed. Anybody that paid their loan back and did the right thing, they're out. Well, during this period with Hamilton, Hamilton is saying the federal government is going to pay all the war debt that accumulated over the course of the 8 years of the war. But the states that already paid their portion of the war debt are like, wait a second here. Why the heck did we pay for our war debt if the federal government is only going to come in and pay it all back anyway, and then sell bonds to help finance the cost? Well, that's Hamilton's plan. That's a portion of his plan, to consolidate the war debt among the 13 states. I think 4 states of 13 paid their war debt. 9 did not. 9 did not. So, in a sense, 4 states are like, this isn't right, but 9 states liked it because their debt is now going to be paid by the national government. And here is why this is important. Eyes on me for a second. Real important point. Hamilton believes that the United States has to have every penny of its war debt paid back. For what reason? I want you to think about the United States, new country. Hamilton, as Treasury Secretary, says it's absolutely vital that the United States has every penny of its war debt. Remember, they owe war debts to France, they owe war debts to Spain, they owe war debts to other nations, they owe war debts to soldiers and pensions. Why does Hamilton and Washington feel it's absolutely vital that the United States doesn't skip out or stiff on any of its war debt? This is Hamilton's motivation, Haley. Why? Okay, so it doesn't cause problems with other countries. Yes, the United States doesn't want to be viewed as a country that stiffs on its loans, on its debts. And the United States, in order, as a new country, in order to maintain its credit rating, Hamilton understands that the United States has to pay its war debt back, because if the United States does not pay its Revolutionary War debts back, the United States can kiss off any chance at all they have of getting loans from European nations in the future for other initiatives. So the United States is, you all know what credit rating is, right? Okay, individuals have a credit score. Okay, your credit score is based, Liz, on what? If you are a consumer in the United States and you have developed a credit score, your credit score is based almost entirely on what criteria? If you're paying your bills on time,
Like, how much you take out, but, how much you also pay, like.
how much you earn versus how much you're using on credit, all those things matter. And if you have a bad credit experience now as an 18 or 17-year-old, it's going to, one, affect your ability to get credit in the future, and two, if you can get credit in the future and you have a bad credit history, the cost of obtaining credit is going to go higher in the form of what? The interest rate that you're charged. So Hamilton, I don't want to get lost in the weeds on this. I don't want to go too deep on it. But Hamilton, and when I say I don't want to get lost in the weeds, I don't want to spend too much time at a lot of stuff that's really not consequential. But Hamilton's motivation is to protect the United States' credit history and to make sure the United States is viewed as a responsible nation that's able to pay its debts. If I borrow money for let's say I borrow $50,000 for a new car today, okay, and I need a new car. I'm in the market for a truck actually. Let's say I borrow $50,000 to purchase a car, and Ava, after 6 months, they have to come and take the car back because I haven't paid a single payment on my car. How's that gonna affect my chances maybe a year down the road from getting another car or truck loan?
They're not gonna want to sell you it, because if you can't pay your money, then they're gonna be like, oh, well, we're not gonna sell it to them.
If I couldn't pay for the first car or truck because I wouldn't make my payments on time, then no bank in their right mind is going to give me credit a second time unless and until I improve my situation. So the country, similar situation. Hamilton wants the country, I'm going to put a word up here.
Sorry for the
Sure.
interruption.
Go ahead.
Liam McGuire, please come to the middle school office. Liam McGuire, middle school office, please.
Hamilton wants to make sure that the U.S. is solvent and credit worthy. He wants to make sure that the United States is solvent on good financial footing and that the U.S. is credit worthy. That's Hamilton's motivation as Treasury Secretary. On top of that, he feels the best way to get there is to become an industrial superpower. Industry, factories, trade with other countries, manufacturing, all those ways. Now that's going to differ from Thomas Jefferson, who's going to become his arch rival. From the reading, they give a little hint to this in the reading. What is Jefferson's view of the future that's different from Hamilton's? Did anybody catch that in the reading? Jefferson, who will become our third president, has a much different outlook or much different vision for America's future. It's not so much industrial for Jefferson as it is what? Think about where he's from. What? Agriculture. He's a Virginian, he's a planter, he's a slave owner. He feels America's future is in agriculture. What is the second level of Hamilton's plan for the United States? I talked briefly, and we're going to see in the video in a minute, talked briefly his plan to basically restructure the debt. Hamilton also supports the creation, Liz, of what? Yeah, the Bank of the United States, National Bank. He is a Federalist, but he wants to create a national bank to help America better manage and better pay its debt and its bills. The opposition to Hamilton on the national bank front is that the anti-Federalists say nowhere in the Constitution does it authorize the government to create a national bank. And he's right. Anti-federalists are right. But President Washington and Hamilton rely on a portion of the Constitution to get around that. We're going to see in the video what that's all about. Let's take a look at the video clip on this. Hamilton's plan explained. This guy that you're going to see here narrating this video is a history teacher in Buffalo. I've been at a couple of conferences of his. Funny guy, American history teacher. His name is Hip Hughes. You might be familiar with him. You might have seen one of these in maybe in my 7th grade class. I've been using these for a while. But this is Hip Hughes, a Buffalo high school teacher.
People that already.
And yes, his hair is always a mess, just like in the picture there. But he's a cool dude. Like I should talk about somebody's hair being a mess, huh? What? US, 11th grade.
People that already had power, but
All right, so we got Hamilton as our topic today.
already had power. But nevertheless, as Secretary of Treasury, he is a Federalist, and he's definitely going to take command of some central issues that are really important to the growth of the country and definitely the historical nature of the country. Number one, he is responsible for the first excise tax.
Notes. Now, you don't have to take these right now, but Hamilton, Hughes is explaining parts of Hamilton's financial plan. His plan is to pay off all war debts. His plan is to raise government revenues, money coming into the government. Okay, how does money come into the government? In the form of what? Not Texas, but taxes. Okay, and creating a national bank. This is the three-pronged approach. Pay off all the war debts, raise government revenues, and store those revenues in a national bank. Raise revenues and store them in a national bank, creating a national bank. This is the three-pronged plan. Pay off all war debts, raise government revenues, money coming in, and creating a national bank. This is Hamilton's three-pronged approach. Imagine his approach being a table with 3 legs, or some type of structure with 3 legs. His plan rests on 3 legs. Paying off the debt, okay? Paying off the debt, raising revenue for the government and making it easy for the government to collect taxes, and creating a national bank.
Tax in American history is basically a sales tax. When he convinces Washington to lobby a pretty high tax on the sales of whiskey. And of course this leads to the Whiskey Rebellion, where
Okay, Whiskey Rebellion, we'll talk about that as we go through our next PowerPoint. Whiskey Rebellion is going to happen during Washington's presidency. A group of farmers in western Pennsylvania are going to rebel over a tax on whiskey, and the tax on whiskey is going to be a tax that farmers are going to feel pretty hard, and it's going to result in Washington having to send 13,000 troops on horseback into the Pittsburgh area to put down this rebellion. By the way, the Whiskey Rebellion, Washington, as the President of the United States, will actually ride on horseback in his military uniform. The only president ever in American history to lead an army into battle while he was serving as president. This will happen. Now, there'll really be no fighting at the Whiskey Rebellion. When the farmers in Pennsylvania see the show of force that Washington brings with him, they kind of back down. But the Whiskey Rebellion, you might see this on the Regents. The Whiskey Rebellion is the only time in American history the President of the United States has led an army into battle in uniform as the President of the United States. Yeah. Just the one time for him and no other time since. Okay. Let's go.
where Hamilton actually rejoins the army, and him and Washington go up and bada boom, bada bing, take care of those Whiskey Rebellion people and really show the country that the supremacy clause is for real, and that the federal government and this relationship of federalism is going to reign supreme over the states. So I always kind of explain to kids that the Whiskey Rebellion is kind of the opposite of Shays' Rebellion. So if Shays' Rebellion showed that the federal government was too weak, Whiskey Rebellion shows you who your daddy is. Second, he is really the first pusher of tariffs. And tariffs are a great way to raise money, and they also are a great way to protect American domestic manufacturers. So it's kind of a northern concept. Most of the manufacturers are up in the northeast of the country, where the natural.
So let's connect the discussion of tariffs to Washington, Washington's era to today. What is the talk on tariffs today that's constantly on the news, especially by the Trump camp in the election? What has Trump promised to do to companies that are leaving the United States to manufacture in Mexico or other places around the world? What is he? John Deere last week, for example, is a great American company. John Deere has basically announced that they are going to leave the United States because of the poor economic climate under President Biden. They're going to leave the U.S. and they're going to start making their tractors and their farm tools in Mexico. And President Trump, former President Trump just last week said if he is elected president, what's he going to do, Palin? Nope. President Trump says that if John Deere leaves the United States for Mexico and takes thousands of American jobs that leave the country to go to Mexicans, Trump has promised that he will put a 200% tariff on any of those tractors coming back into the United States, which means that if John Deere plans to sell any of those tractors that are manufactured in Mexico, they're going to be 200% higher in cost than it would be if they kept their plant here in the United States. So tariffs are basically taxes on goods that are coming into the country. Okay? Tariffs are taxes on goods coming into the country. If I'm an American business owner, let's say I make farm goods. Let's say I'm a local company, just like we have. What's the local company that made farm goods 125 years ago here in town? The Walter A. Wood Mowing and Reaping Company, which, by the way, was John Deere's biggest competitor 100 years ago in the country. Okay, if I make tractors in the United States and I employ a factory with 3,000 workers, if I make them in the United States and I'm making a tractor that is similar in quality and in construction as a John Deere tractor, if John Deere's tractors are being made in Mexico and they're going to have a 200% tariff on it, which means the cost of that tractor is going to be 200% higher than the one I make, what are most Americans going to do in that instance?
Not buy from John Deere.
They're not going to buy from John Deere, they're going to buy from who? They're going to buy from me. What's this? Oh, okay, okay. Thanks, Kirsten. Appreciate it. Americans are, assuming the quality of my tractor is just as good as John Deere, Americans are going to buy from American manufacturer, and because the cost is going to be dramatically what? Less without the tariff. So Hamilton is saying in 1791, 1792, Hamilton is saying that we are going to place tariffs on British goods and foreign goods coming into the country, and this is a way to encourage American consumers to do what? Buy from American-made companies, boosting the American economy. Hamilton's plan with tariffs is to make sure that Americans are buying American-made goods. That's what a tariff is designed to do. It jacks up the cost on foreign-made goods and thereby encourages Americans to buy American-made goods. Okay?
Harbors are and such. So Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, convinces Washington and Congress to pass a series of tariffs, which the South sees as kind of an abomination, because whenever you have a tariff, that means that prices are going to go up in stores. So if you're a Southerner and you're shopping at Walmart, of course Walmart's not there back then, you're going to see the price of everything go up. But on the other hand, if you're a manufacturer, if you sell underwear in Boston, people are going to be buying more of your Boston because French underwear is going to be very expensive. So make sure you know a tariff is a tax on an import, and that Hamilton got those tariffs passed in order to protect U.S. manufacturers and grow domestic manufacturers. And the last thing that you really need to know, and there's lots of other stuff, but the last big thematic idea is the idea of the national debt. Before the national debt, states carried their own debt. Under the Articles, this was true, and most of the northern states had a very high debt from the cost of the Revolutionary War. So what Hamilton proposes and gets done is creating a national debt, where the federal government assumes the debt for the states. And this is great if you're a northern state, because it kind of takes the debt off your back. The problem is that it kind of puts it on the whole country's back. So again, the southern states are not completely thrilled that the national debt has kind of put a little bit of debt on them in a sense as well. He's also the founder of the National Bank, and he convinces Congress that the elastic clause, kind of a loose interpretation of the Constitution, can be used to put forward the national bank to basically control currency. And this is going to come up in McCulloch versus Maryland, when the Supreme Court under John Marshall is going to agree that there is a constitutionality to the national bank with implied powers in the elastic clause. And also that Maryland isn't going to be able to tax that national bank, which is a kind of a who's your daddy clause thing too. So Hamilton, national debt, national bank, whiskey tax, Secretary of Treasury, gangster federalist. Eventually, he's going to turn against the Federalist Party, who nominates Aaron Burr, I believe. No, John Adams. I think he turned against John Adams in 1800, and he eventually is going to support his nemesis, Thomas Jefferson, over Aaron Burr, who he thought was kind of a ding-dong. And a few years later, down the road, he actually had an affair with his wife, he fell out of politics, yada, yada, yada. Aaron Burr hated him, man. He was single-handedly responsible for denying Aaron Burr not only the presidency, but later the governorship of New York. And eventually, on the banks of the Hudson River, they have a duel. And Aaron Burr shot him in the abdomen. I think Hamilton hit a branch above him. Like during the duel, Hamilton was being a gentleman. He's like, I'm not going to shoot the guy in the face. I'll shoot above his head. Burr was like, bam! And Hamilton died. The end!
Hamilton died in that duel. We'll cover that in detail. I got a video for that later in the week or later in the school year. So those are the key things you need to know about Hamilton for right now. Okay, we'll revisit this as we move on. But for now, I want you to open up your PowerPoint, please, that I shared with you today on Chapter 6. It should be PowerPoint number 5, Trouble Abroad. Okay, and this was shared right on your Google Classroom at the top of the page. We're going to talk today about, and this is the last part of Chapter 6. We finished Chapter 6 today and tomorrow. And we're making good progress on this. Good, so let's continue. Hey, Katie. So we are going to look today at challenges abroad and domestic stability in early U.S. history. So 2 key terms up here, all right? And, a lot of the times as teachers, I take for granted, especially with my 7th graders, I take for granted that 7th graders are going to know basic words. Okay? Here and here. Okay? And there's me with glasses. All right? Those 2 words. All right? We talk about challenges abroad. Miss Edshill, what are we talking about? Challenges abroad. Yeah, outside the country. Other parts of the world. Okay? So challenge abroad, and when we talk about domestic stability, Palin, we're talking about what? No. Domestic. If abroad is overseas, domestic is here in the homeland. Okay? Abroad. So we're going to look at challenges abroad and domestic stability in early U.S. history. All right? And we'll get through as much of this as we can today, and we'll finish it tomorrow after our quiz. Understand the international and domestic challenges faced by the early U.S. We're going to explore key events that tested the new nation's stability. Again, new country, 1788, 89 when Washington's elected. A lot of countries around the world looked at the United States and their victory in the Revolution as a fluke. What's a fluke? Lizzie? Yeah, it was an accident. They were lucky. The United States was lucky to win the American Revolution, a lot of people felt. And they looked at the United States as maybe ripe to be beaten in the 1790s as a new country in the world. So we're going to seek some of the events that test the new nation's stability, and there will be few, quite a few. We're going to look at aligning with academic standards on constitutional foundations as well. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the early foreign relationships in the Republic. Okay, foreign relationships in the early Republic. The U.S. is going to face significant foreign policy challenges. Okay, we're in debt. The other thing not mentioned, it is mentioned in your reading, the United States military was greatly reduced after the Revolution. Soldiers went home. We didn't have a large standing army. And if you don't have a large standing army to defend yourself, that's clearly going to be a concern. So the U.S. faced significant foreign policy challenges. European powers tested the new nation's resolve, and trade and territorial disputes were going to be common. Trade and territorial disputes are going to be common. I've got a author's video on this topic that I want to play for you. Let's do that now.
The Revolutionary War gave the United States its independence from Great Britain, but tensions remained between the two nations. In particular, Americans resented the fact that the British continued to occupy forts along the Canadian-American border near the Great Lakes. Those British soldiers also provided weapons to Native Americans living in the area who were attacking American settlements. In addition, the British refused to allow American merchants to trade with British colonies in the Caribbean. This had long been one of the most profitable aspects of the American economy, was trading with the British colonies in the Caribbean. Now that was cut off. As a result, relationships between the new United States and its former colonial mother, Great Britain, remained tense and anxious in the late 18th century and the early 19th century, and would eventually lead to a second war between the United States and Great Britain.
So that second war will be called the War of 1812. We will see soon, next week, what happens exactly like that. But after the war, two things are going on here. The British, after the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783, the British have a series of forts that remain in the United States in the Ohio River Valley, south of the Great Lakes. Okay? And the British, to further antagonize the United States, the British are encouraging Native American tribes to rise up against settlers that are expanding west across the Appalachian Mountains. So the British are kind of egging on the Native Americans to attack American settlers, and this clearly is problematic to Washington and his presidency because the war's over. The war's over. Britain has been defeated. Most of the soldiers have left the nation, but in the area west of the Appalachians, Britain still has forts. Britain still has a military presence. So that's going to create challenges. They're just kind of lurking. They're just kind of waiting. They're there. They're in the wilderness. This is all Native American territory. There's not a lot going on here in terms of population right after the war. But Native Americans are being used by the British to kind of attack Americans. The British are still having forts that are occupied there. So America is facing a continued challenge with the British presence in the Ohio River Valley. Now, what does that mean? That means that the new nation is still really got to focus on dealing with an enemy that technically has been defeated. But Britain's kind of hanging around. They're like that blister. They're like that sore on your foot that just like won't go away. And the United States is concerned about this. Okay? The United States is concerned about this in 1787. Let's go back to our PowerPoint and go to the next slide. France and the French Revolution is going to have a huge impact on the United States. Now, this is not a class on European history, but I will tell you the French Revolution is going to begin in 1789, and it is largely inspired, important point here, French Revolution is largely inspired by the events that occurred during the American Revolution. Okay? France is going to overthrow, okay, during the French Revolution, France is going to, just like the United States did, overthrow the monarchy from Great Britain. France is looking to get rid of a monarchy in the French Revolution, and it's going to divide American opinion. It's going to divide American opinion. Federalists and the Democratic Republicans are going to be divided on their support for France. Federalists and Democratic Republicans are going to be divided on their support for France. Federalists are largely going to say what about supporting France during their French Revolution? Palin. Federalists wanted nothing to do with America getting involved with the French Revolution because why, Lizzie? Federalists wanted to basically, to the extent that they could, Federalists wanted to step back and try their best to remain neutral, all right? And that's going to result in a proclamation. It's going to result in a proclamation established in 1793, which is going to be George Washington's signature policy statement on the United States' place in European affairs. The Neutrality Proclamation of 1793 is going to say the United States, and he's going to use these specific terms. George Washington will say that the United States should steer clear of what he called foreign entanglements. Steer clear of foreign entanglements. Washington said America's got enough of its own worries right now as a new nation. We do not need to get re-involved in another European conflict. And France, someone tell me, and I'm not going to pick on anybody on this one, but I'm going to ask for a volunteer. Somebody tell me why France is going to be justifiably pissed off at Washington's policy statement on neutrality. If it wasn't for France's help, the United States certainly would not have won the American Revolution as quick as they did. France's help was absolutely vital to the U.S. winning the war. France extended a hand and helped us win the battle. And not only that, the United States was a signatory of a treaty with France that basically made them allies in perpetuity. It made them allies forever after the revolution. How did the United States get out of that? How does the United States worm their way out of the treaty that they had with France, which made the United States have to come to France's aid if they were involved in the war? The United States was obligated under the treaty to do it, but the United States said we don't have to because of what reason, Palin? Oh, they want our help. The treaty with France was made with the king. And the king is minus his neck and head at this point in France in 1793. And the United States says the agreement, the treaty we had in France was made with the king who is no longer alive. And the United States and Washington said that we are not going to get involved. And France was livid. France was livid over this. And they had a legitimate beef. They had a legitimate gripe. But Washington held very firm on this, to the disappointment of guys like Jefferson and other Republicans who wanted and supported the French Revolution and wanted the United States to get involved. All right, who wanted the United States to get involved in that. All right, let's wrap up with the next topic. What page are we on here? We are on page Let's talk about Jay's Treaty, okay? Jay's Treaty is gonna be another situation in the area after the country's established that's gonna cause difficulty. It's gonna be a problem abroad for a lot of Americans. Jay's Treaty is named after John Jay, okay? John Jay helped create a treaty with Great Britain to resolve lingering conflicts, to address British soldiers and British forts remaining in the West, to address British encouraging Native Americans to attack American settlers. And his treaty will become controversial among Americans because a lot of Americans felt that John Jay in his treaty gave too much in the deal to the British and not enough to the Americans. It helped avoid war, but Jay's treaty is going to help strain relations between America and France, because at the same time that John Jay is establishing his treaty with Great Britain, France is saying the United States is not really neutral. They are siding with Britain, because remember, Britain and France are arch what? They're arch enemies. All right. So we'll pick up at Jay's Treaty tomorrow. Don't forget you have a vote count for tomorrow.
Alan Auburn to the high school office. Alan Auburn to the high school office.
What?
Can I borrow one of your tablets?
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Good night, everybody.